Hi there! Today what we're going to be talking about is making equivalent fractions. We're going to be looking at the number line and using the area model and connecting it to multiplication. So if you look at the top of your paper, it should say Lesson 1 problem set, and then it'll say 5.3. And that's how we know that we're on the right one. We did number 1 in class today, so we're going to work on number 2. You may have already started it, but we're going to go ahead and get started. Okay, so it says at the top, use your folded paper strips to mark the points 0 and 1 above the number line. So we're looking to mark 0/3, 1/3, 2/3, and 3/3. Well, you can use your fraction strips that we made in class, or if you feel comfortable dividing it up by yourself, you can do that as well. We're going to start with our 0 and our 1, and we're going to go ahead and label this 0/3. If we have none of something or 0 of something, then 0 is our denominator, and the 3, our denominator, tells us how many parts there are. Next, we're going to look at our whole. Well, our whole is 1, and if we break our whole into 3 parts, like our denominator says, we have 3 of those parts if we have one whole. So then we're going to mark off 1/3 and 2/3. You do that by making 2 marks on your number line, making sure they're spaced evenly, and go ahead and label those 1/3 and 2/3. Okay, now what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to be looking at problem number 1, and in class today we talked about using 2/3. So on our first set, we're going to divide all of our area models into thirds, and then we're going to shade in 2 in each section. Now we're going to start making equivalent fractions. So if we look at our first area model, right now we have 2/3. If we divide this section in half, we've created a different fraction in a sense, but the same area is still covered. So what we're going to do now is cut our first model in half. And you can make yours a little bit more even than I've made mine. We still have 2/3 covered, but now we have, instead of having 3 parts in our whole, we have 6 parts in our whole. That's going to be our denominator. Okay, so we're going to take a peek at each one of these groups. We're going to look at our thirds. Well, we still have 2/3, but now in each one of these thirds, there are 2 parts. So we have 2/3 with 2 parts in each one of them, which gives us 4 boxes that are shaded overall. But in our whole, like we started off, we still have our 3/3, and in each third there are 2 separate parts. So here we have 3 groups with 2 in each group. So when we multiply that out, we get the fraction 4/6. And so these 2 fractions, 4/6 and 2/3, are going to be equivalent. So we'll write that underneath. 2/3 is equal to 4/6. And we can see that in our model above. All right, now let's move on to our second one. We're going to do the same thing, but this time instead of making 1 cut, we're going to make 2 cuts. Essentially, we've divided it into thirds going the opposite direction. Well, we still have 2/3 covered, so a third here and a third here, and there are still 3/3 in our whole. But now, since we've made our cuts, we've divided it and changed the denominator, and you can count this out and see that we have 9 in our denominator. So we started with 2/3. And if we look at one of these groups, let's look at this first group, we have 1, 2, 3 pieces in this group. Right now we have 2 groups. These are these 2 right here. And in each group there are 3 pieces. So we'll say 2 groups of 3, or 2 times 3, which gets me 6 shaded pieces altogether. And I had 3 groups to begin with. That's these 3 right here. And in each of those groups there are 3 pieces. So 3 groups of 3 gives me 9 pieces total. So 2/3 is equal to 6/9. Okay. If you look at the third one, in our first one we made 1 cut, in our second one we made 2 cuts, in our third one we're going to make 3 cuts. 1, 2, 3. All right, we still have our 3/3, and 2 of them are still shaded. So if we write this out, 2/3, well, again, we've changed our denominator. Okay. So we're going to look at what we're going to multiply by. Well, in each one of these thirds, there are 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces. We have 2 groups, one group here and one group here, and each of them has 4 pieces. So 2 groups with 4 pieces gives us 8 pieces shaded, and 3 groups, if we were to count the pieces in 3 groups, with 4 in each one, gives us 12 pieces shaded. So 2/3 is equal to 8/12. Last but not least, we're going to go over to our last model, and we're going to do the same thing, but instead of making not 1 cut, not 2, not 3, but we're going to make 4 cuts. We're going to cut this into fifths. 1, 2, 3, 4 cuts. We cut it into fifths horizontally and thirds vertically, which means that we have a different fraction this time, and we're going to find out what that fraction is. So 2/3 is what we started with. Here are our 2/3, one here, one here. There are still 3/3 in our whole thing, 1, 2, 3, but this time we cut them into separate pieces. So in these 2 groups right here, we have 2 groups, and in each one of those groups there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces. So 2 groups of 5 gives me 10 shaded pieces. In my 3 groups altogether, if I include this third group, I have 3 groups of 5, which gives me 15 pieces. So we find out that 2/3 is equivalent to 10/15.